There's a saying that grief is the price we pay for love. But for Cecilia Blackwood, the price was about to double. Standing in the freezing rain at the edge of her mother's open grave, 8 months pregnant and trembling, she wasn't just saying goodbye to the woman who raised her. She was about to be blindsided by the man she promised to love forever. Just as the priest whispered, "Ashes to ashes," her husband Jordan didn't hold her hand. Instead, he handed her a manila envelope that would shatter her life. He thought he was escaping a mountain of debt. He had no idea he was walking away from a $500 million empire. This is the story of the most brutal divorce in Boston history, and the twist that no one saw coming. The rain in Boston doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime stick harder. It was a Tuesday in November when Margaret Sterling finally let go. She died in the same narrow, drafty brownstone on Beacon Hill, where she had spent the last 40 years, a house that much like its owner had seen better days. The paint was peeling in long grey strips, the heating system clanked like a dying engine, and the heavy velvet curtains smelled of dust and old lavender. To the outside world, Margaret was a recluse. A chaotic, slightly unhinged woman who hoarded newspapers and wore moth-eaten cardigans. To her daughter Cecilia, she was simply Mum. Cecilia sat in the corner of the living room, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly. She was 8 months pregnant with her first child, a boy. The baby kicked a sharp reminder of life amidst the gloom of death, but Cecilia felt too numb to react. "We need to talk about the arrangements, Cecilia," Jordan said. He was standing by the window checking his watch. He hadn't sat down since they arrived. Jordan Blackwood was a man who looked like he had been manufactured rather than born. Sharp jawline, tailored suit that cost more than Margaret's car, and eyes that were perpetually calculating. When Cecilia had met him 3 years ago, those calculations had seemed like ambition. Now, they just felt cold. "I called the funeral home," Cecilia whispered, her voice cracking. "The one on Charles Street. Mum liked the director there." Jordan turned his face tight with irritation. "The one on Charles Street. Do you have any idea what they charge for a basic casket? We aren't exactly swimming in liquidity right now, see? She's my mother, Jordan. I'm not burying her in a pine box. We have to be realistic," Jordan snapped, stepping closer. "Your mother died with nothing. Less than nothing. I've been looking at the piles of bills on her desk. She hasn't paid property taxes in 2 years. The bank was probably weeks away from foreclosing on this dump. And now that debt becomes our problem." Cecilia looked down. She knew money was tight. Jordan's tech startup Nexus Flow was hemorrhaging cash, and he had leveraged their own home to keep it afloat. He had been banking on Margaret having a secret stash of money, old family money. But as Margaret's health declined, the only thing they found were stacks of coupons and final notice letters. "I don't care about the debt," Cecilia said, firmly looking up at him. "We will manage. We always do. But I need you to be here for me. Please, just be my husband." Jordan looked at her. For a second, Cecilia thought she saw a flicker of pity. But then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and the wall came back up. "I have to take this. It's the investors," he muttered, walking out into the hallway. Cecilia closed her eyes, listening to the rain hammer against the glass. She didn't hear him talking to investors. She heard him whispering to someone named Isabel. She told herself it was just a colleague. She told herself the stress was making her paranoid. She didn't know that downstairs, Jordan was already drafting the paperwork that would destroy her. The funeral was held 3 days later at Mount Auburn Cemetery. The weather was merciless, a biting wind that whipped the falling leaves into tiny tornadoes. Despite Margaret's reclusive nature, a surprising number of people had shown up. There was old Mr. Henderson, the grocer, who always saved the bruised peaches for Margaret because she liked to bake pies. There was Mrs. Higgins, the librarian. And then there were a handful of men in dark suits, standing in the back, men Cecilia didn't recognize. She assumed they were creditors' vultures waiting to pick the bones of the estate. Cecilia wore a black coat that struggled to button over her belly. She stood by the open grave, clutching a single white rose. Jordan stood next to her, holding a large black umbrella. He held it high enough to keep himself dry, but the cold rain still dripped onto Cecilia's shoulder. The priest, Father O'Malley, was rushing through the service. Margaret was a woman of simple tastes, he intoned, a woman who understood the value of humility. Cecilia sobbed quietly. She felt a contraction, false labor perhaps, or just the physical manifestation of her heart breaking. She reached for Jordan's hand. He pulled away. "Jordan," she whispered. The service ended. People began to disperse, heading toward their cars to escape the freeze. The strange men in suits didn't leave. They moved closer, standing like sentinels under the oak trees. "Cecilia," Jordan said. His voice was devoid of emotion. It sounded like he was reading a menu. "I can't do this anymore." Cecilia wiped a mix of rain and tears from her face. "What can't do what?" "The grief I know, honey, it's hard, but—" "No," he interrupted. He reached into the inside pocket of his cashmere coat. He didn't pull out a tissue. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. "I mean us. This marriage." The world seemed to stop. The wind died down. The only sound was the thud of dirt being shoveled onto her mother's coffin behind her. "I don't understand," Cecilia stammered. "I'm having our son in 4 weeks. My mother just died." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm filing for divorce," Jordan said, shoving the envelope into her frozen hands. "I've already moved my things out of the condo. You can stay there until the baby is born, but after that we'll need to sell it to cover the mortgage and your mother's debts." Cecilia stared at the envelope. Petition for dissolution of marriage. "Why?" she choked out. Is there someone else?" Jordan sighed, looking bored. "It's not just about that. It's the financial anchor you've tied around my neck. I married a partner, Cecilia, not a charity case. Your mother was a hoarder who died in squalor. I'm on the verge of taking my company public, and I can't have your family's bankruptcy dragging down my reputation." "My mother—" Cecilia's voice shook with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "My mother was a good woman. And you're doing this now at her grave." "It seemed efficient," Jordan said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Since we're dealing with endings today, the lawyers will be in touch. Don't make a scene, see? It's embarrassing." He turned on his heel and walked away. He didn't look back. He walked straight toward a waiting black Mercedes sedan. As the door opened, Cecilia saw a woman in the passenger seat. Blonde young, looking at her phone. Isabel. Cecilia's knees gave way. She sank onto the wet grass, clutching the divorce papers to her chest, wailing into the cold air. She thought she was alone. But she wasn't. One of the men in the dark suits, the strangers who had stood at the back, stepped forward. He was an older man, leaning on a cane with a silver handle. He had watched the entire exchange with eyes that looked like flint. He approached Cecilia slowly, followed by a younger associate holding an umbrella. The older man extended a hand to help her up. "Mrs. Blackwood," the man said. His voice was gravelly but kind. Cecilia looked up, shivering violently. Who are you? Are you here for the house? Just take it. Take it all." "I am not a creditor, my dear," the man said. "My name is Andrew Sterling. I am the senior partner at Sterling, Roth and Vance in London." Cecilia blinked. "Sterling. Like my mother. Your mother." Andrew said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "Was not who you thought she was. And that man who just walked away, he has just made the most expensive mistake in history." Andrew signaled to his associate. "Get the car around. Mrs. Blackwood needs to get warm. We have a will to read." "But she had nothing," Cecilia wept. "She had nothing but coupons." Andrew chuckled darkly. "That, my dear, was the test, and everyone but you just failed it." Andrew Sterling didn't take Cecilia back to the drafty brownstone on Beacon Hill. Instead, the black Rolls-Royce navigated through the slushy streets of Boston and pulled up to the entrance of the Ritz-Carlton. Cecilia, still shivering and clutching her stomach, felt entirely out of place. Her coat was soaked, her boots were muddy from the cemetery grass, and her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. "Mr. Sterling," she stammered as the doorman opened the car door. "I can't go in there. I look like a wreck, and I certainly can't afford a cup of tea here." Andrew stepped out, his silver-handled cane clicking on the pavement. "My dear, you own the building. Or more accurately, the trust that holds the majority shares in the hospitality group that owns the building does. You can walk in there naked if you choose, though I wouldn't recommend it in this weather." Cecilia froze. What? Come inside. Warmth first. Explanations second." They were ushered into the presidential suite on the top floor. A fire was already crackling in the hearth. A team of staff who seemed to know Andrew brought blankets, hot soup, and a pot of chamomile tea. Once the staff had retreated, Andrew sat in a wing-back chair opposite Cecilia. She was wrapped in a cashmere throw, staring at him as if he were an alien. "My name is Andrew Sterling," he repeated. "I am your mother's cousin, second cousin to be precise, and for the last 40 years I have been the executor of the Sterling Family Trust." "I don't understand," Cecilia said, her voice trembling. "My mother was a receptionist. She retired with a tiny pension. She cut her own hair to save $20. We ate leftovers for days. She was poor, Andrew." Andrew sighed a long, heavy sound. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photo. It was black and white, showing a young woman who looked exactly like Margaret, but she was wearing a diamond tiara and standing on the deck of a massive yacht. "Your mother was Margaret Eleanor Sterling, the sole heiress to Sterling Maritime and Logistics, the company that moves roughly 15% of the freight across the Atlantic. When she was 22, she was the most eligible bachelorette in New York." Cecilia took the photo, her fingers tracing her mother's smiling face. "This is Mum. But why? Why did she live like that?" "Because she was terrified," Andrew said softly. "When she inherited the fortune, she was surrounded by sharks, men who wanted her money, friends who sold stories to the press, distant relatives who sued her. She felt like a product, not a person. So she ran away. She changed her name, moved to Boston, and created a life where she could be sure, absolutely sure, that anyone who loved her for her." Andrew leaned forward. "She met your father, a simple carpenter. He didn't know about the money until the day he died. He loved her when she was poor. That was the happiest she ever was. Cecilia felt tears welling up again. She lied to me. My whole life. She protected you, Andrew corrected. She wanted you to grow up with values, not vanity. She wanted you to build character. But she always intended to give it to you when you were ready. Or God forbid, when she passed. But the debt, Cecilia whispered. The unpaid taxes. Jordan left because he thought she was drowning in debt. Andrew's eyes turned hard, the flinty look returning. That was the final test. Margaret's health was failing for the last year. She knew she was dying. She also knew your husband was ambitious. She instructed me to stop paying the bills on the Beacon Hill house. She wanted to see what Jordan would do when the money ran out. She wanted to see if he would stand by you when the walls were closing in. Cecilia felt sick. He failed. He didn't just fail Cecilia. He detonated his future. Andrew opened the leather briefcase again. He pulled out a document bound in blue velvet. This is her last will and testament. It was updated 3 weeks ago, right after Jordan tried to pressure her into signing over the deed to the house to cover his business loans. She knew then. Andrew placed the document on the coffee table. Are you ready to see what you're really worth, Mrs. Blackwood? The room was silent, save for the crackling fire. Cecilia reached out and opened the blue folder. The legal language was dense, but Andrew guided her through it. The assets are considerable, Andrew said, putting on his reading glasses. There is the real estate portfolio. The townhouse in London, the villa in Tuscany, the penthouse on Park Avenue, and the estate in the Hamptons. And of course the Beacon Hill brownstone, which sits on land worth about $4 million alone. Cecilia's head was spinning. $4 million. Jordan thought it was worthless. Jordan is a tech bro, Andrew scoffed. He understands algorithms, not real value. But the real estate is just the garnish. The main course is the holding company. Andrew pointed to a line item, Sterling Maritime Global Holdings. You are now the majority shareholder. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, your net worth is approximately $520 million. Cecilia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. 500 million, give or take the market fluctuations, Andrew said casually. But there is a catch, a specific clause regarding your marital status. Cecilia's heart hammered against her ribs. What catch? Andrew turned the page to a section highlighted in red. Paragraph 14, Section B, the loyalty clause. He read aloud, To my beloved daughter Cecilia I leave the entirety of my estate. However, I am aware of the financial strain her husband Jordan Blackwood has placed upon her. I am also aware of his character. Therefore, if at the time of my death Jordan Blackwood remains married to my daughter and supports her through her grief and the birth of their child, he is to be granted a one-time gift of $20 million to settle his debts and a seat on the board of directors. Cecilia closed her eyes. $20 million. That would have saved Jordan's company 10 times over. He would have been rich beyond his wildest dreams. Andrew continued reading, his voice dropping an octave. However, should Jordan Blackwood file for divorce, separate from or abandon my daughter prior to or during the funeral proceedings, or within 1 year of my death, he is to receive absolutely nothing. Furthermore, the trust is instructed to aggressively purchase any outstanding debt held by his companies to ensure the security of my grandchild. Andrew looked up over his glasses. Did he serve you the papers, Cecilia? Cecilia nodded slowly, reaching into her coat pocket. She pulled out the crumpled, rain-soaked envelope Jordan had shoved at her. He gave me these at the graveside, before the burial was even finished. Andrew took the envelope. He looked at the timestamp on the filing stamp. Filed this morning at 8:30 a.m., Andrew noted with a grim satisfaction, and served at 1100 a.m. He was in such a rush to get away from your poverty that he sprinted right off a cliff. "He doesn't know," Cecilia whispered. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, burning realization. "He thinks I'm homeless. He thinks I'm going to be sleeping on a friend's couch tonight." "He thinks you are a liability," Andrew said. "He has no idea that you are now the bank that owns his loans." Andrew tapped the clause about purchasing debt. "Your mother was thorough. She bought the promissory notes for Nexus Flow Jordan's company 3 months ago through a shell corporation. Technically, Cecilia, you are his boss. You own his debt. You can call it in whenever you like." Cecilia stood up. She walked to the window looking out over the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, Jordan was celebrating with Isabel. He was probably drinking champagne, thinking he had dodged a bullet. He was probably laughing about how he had cut the dead weight. She thought about the way he looked at his watch while her mother lay in a coffin. She thought about the way he pulled his hand away when she needed him most. She thought about the woman in the car. The baby kicked again, a strong, powerful thump. Cecilia placed a hand on the glass. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the scared, mousy girl from the funeral. It was a woman with $500 million and a score to settle. "Andrew," she said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "Yes, my dear. I don't want to call the debt in yet." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Oh, no." Cecilia turned around. Her eyes were dry. "He filed for divorce because he wanted to be free of me. He wanted to be a big shot without a dead-weight wife. I want to give him exactly what he wants." "I'm listening," Andrew said, a smile spreading across his face. "I want to sign the papers," Cecilia said. "I want to give him the quickest, easiest divorce in history. I want him to think he won. And then I want to crush him." "A strategy worthy of a Sterling," Andrew said, closing the folder. "I'll have the lawyers draft the acceptance, but first we need to get you some new clothes. The CEO of Sterling Maritime cannot be seen in a wet coat." "One more thing," Cecilia said. "You said there's a gala next week, the Winter Charity Ball." "Yes, it's the biggest event of the season. Jordan has been trying to get an invite for years to woo investors." "Get him an invite," Cecilia said coldly. "Make sure he's there, and make sure he brings his girlfriend." "And you?" Andrew asked. "I'll be there too," Cecilia said. "It's time to introduce everyone to the real Margaret Sterling's daughter." 2 days later, the divorce signing took place in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of Jordan's lawyer on State Street. The atmosphere was suffocating. Jordan sat at the head of the table, flanked by his attorney, a man named Gregor, who smelled of stale tobacco. Jordan looked refreshed, unburdened. He was already wearing a new watch, a heavy gold chronograph that Cecilia knew he couldn't afford. Cecilia sat opposite him. She wore her old wool coat, the one with the fraying hem. She kept her head down, playing the part of the defeated, destitute wife perfectly. Andrew had advised her to bring a lawyer, but Cecilia refused. "If I bring a shark," she had said, "he'll get suspicious. He needs to think I'm giving up." "So," Jordan said, tapping his pen on the mahogany table. "Gregor has outlined the terms. It's a clean break, see? I take the debt I incurred, which is generous of me, and you keep, well, whatever personal effects you have. No alimony, no child support until the paternity test confirms the child is mine." Cecilia looked up, her eyes flashing. "You know he's yours." I know nothing of the sort, Jordan sneered. You've been erratic lately. Who knows what you were doing while I was working late? Anyway, sign here. It waives your right to any future claims on my assets or my company Nexus flow. He pushed the document toward her. It was a clean break agreement, designed to protect the wealthier spouse from the poorer one. The irony was almost delicious. And this, Cecilia pointed to a second document. A confidentiality agreement, Gregor grunted. Mr. Blackwood is a rising figure in the tech world. He doesn't want you selling sob stories to the tabloids about being left at a funeral. Cecilia picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. You're right, Jordan, she said softly. I don't want anything from you. I don't want your money. I don't want your help. I want to be completely, 100% independent of you. Smart girl, Jordan grinned. Finally, showing some sense. She signed. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the only noise in the room. With that signature, Jordan Blackwood officially severed his legal connection to the sterling fortune. He had just signed away his safety net. Done, Cecilia said, sliding the papers back. Good luck, C, Jordan said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Try not to end up in a shelter. It's bad for the kid. He walked out without looking back. The next week was a whirlwind. Andrew Sterling moved Cecilia out of the drafty brownstone and into the penthouse at the Ritz while the security team swept the Beacon Hill house. It wasn't just a change of address, it was a metamorphosis. A team of stylists, nutritionists, and business consultants descended upon the suite. Cecilia didn't just need to look rich, she needed to look like a matriarch. She needed to look like a woman who could crush a tech CEO with a phone call. The winter charity ball is Saturday, Andrew said, reviewing the guest list on his tablet. It's the premier event for Boston's elite. Everyone will be there. Senators, old money, new tech, and Jordan. Did he take the bait? Cecilia asked. She was standing for a fitting a deep emerald green gown being pinned around her 8-month baby bump. Hook, line, and sinker. Andrew chuckled. We had the invitation sent via a third-party PR firm. He thinks he's being scouted by venture capitalists. He's bringing the girl Isabel. Good, Cecilia said, looking at herself in the mirror. The green silk draped over her form, elegantly making her look regal, like a queen carrying an heir. She touched her neck where a necklace of emeralds and diamonds, the sterling heirlooms, rested cold against her skin. Andrew makes sure the debt transfer is finalized by Friday. When I walk into that ballroom, I want to own every chair he sits on. It's already done, Andrew said. You own the mortgage on his office building, the lien on his intellectual property, and as of this morning, the personal loan he took out to buy that Mercedes. Cecilia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Then let's go to a party. The grand ballroom of the Copley Plaza Hotel was a sea of velvet diamonds and black ties. A live orchestra played waltzes from a balcony as waiters navigated the crowd with trays of champagne and caviar. Jordan Blackwood felt like a king. He strode through the entrance with Isabel on his arm. She was wearing a red dress that was a little too tight, a little too loud for the conservative Boston crowd. But Jordan didn't care. He was high on the adrenaline of freedom. This is it, babe, he whispered to her. Look at this room. This is where the real money is. I'm going to close a Series B round tonight, I can feel it. Isabel giggled, sipping her champagne. You're so smart, baby. I'm so glad you got rid of that depressing wife of yours. She would have dragged this whole vibe down. Don't mention her, Jordan said, scanning the room. She's ancient history. They mingled for an hour. Jordan handed out business cards like they were candy, but he noticed something strange. People were whispering. Groups of older men, the real power players, were huddled together, glancing toward the stage and murmuring about the sterling return. Jordan caught the arm of an acquaintance, a banker named Davis. "Davis, good to see you. What's the buzz?" "Everyone's acting like the Queen is coming." Davis looked at Jordan with a strange expression, half amusement, half pity. "You haven't heard. The Sterling Trust has a new chairwoman. She's coming out of seclusion tonight to announce a massive philanthropic fund. Rumor is she's worth $500 million. Ooh, sterling." Jordan frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Old shipping money, right? Thought that line died out? "Apparently not," Davis said, pulling away. "Excuse me. I want to get a good spot for the speech." The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, tonight is a historic night. Please welcome the new head of the Sterling Foundation and the chairwoman of Sterling Maritime Global, Mrs. Cecilia Sterling Blackwood." Jordan dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, but no one heard it over the applause. "Cecilia." The heavy velvet curtains parted. Cecilia stepped out. She didn't look like the woman weeping in the rain. She looked like a goddess. The emerald gown flowed around her like liquid money. Her hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, showcasing the diamond and emerald necklace that was worth more than Jordan's entire existence. Her pregnancy didn't make her look weak. It made her look formidable, a vessel of life and power. She walked to the podium, her eyes scanning the crowd. She found him instantly. A spotlight seemed to follow her gaze, landing on Jordan, who was standing there with his mouth open, Isabel clutching his arm in confusion. "Thank you," Cecilia said, her voice clear and amplified, echoing through the silent hall. "My mother Margaret taught me that true wealth is not about what you hoard, but what you can endure. She lived a humble life to teach me the value of loyalty. And in her death, she revealed the true cost of betrayal." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I am here tonight to announce a new initiative, a fund for single mothers who have been abandoned by partners who prioritized profit over family." A ripple of nervous laughter and applause went through the room. Jordan felt like the walls were closing in. He started to back away, pulling Isabel with him. "We need to go," Jordan hissed. "Now." "Why?" Isabel whined. "Ideally, we should meet her. She has so much money, Jordan. Maybe she'll invest." "You idiot, that's my ex-wife," Jordan snapped, his voice rising in panic. He turned to flee, but his path was blocked. Andrew Sterling stood there, leaning on his cane, flanked by 2 large security guards. "Going somewhere, Mr. Blackwood?" Andrew asked pleasantly. "Get out of my way," Jordan snarled. "I'm leaving." "I'm afraid you can't leave just yet," Andrew said. "The valet has been instructed to hold your car." "My car? You can't do that. That's a $100,000 Mercedes." "Actually." Cecilia's voice came from behind him. Jordan spun around. Cecilia had descended from the stage. The crowd had parted for her, creating a circle around them. She stood 5 feet away, looking at him with eyes as cold as the Atlantic. "It's my Mercedes," Cecilia said calmly. "You missed 3 payments, Jordan. And since I bought the loan from the bank this morning, I've decided to repossess it, effective immediately." You bought my loan," Jordan stammered. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure terror. "I bought all of them," Cecilia said, stepping closer. "The car, the house, the business loans for Nexus Flow. I own it all, Jordan. You are currently trespassing at my party, wearing a suit you bought on a credit card that I now control." Isabel let go of Jordan's arm, as if he were on fire. She stepped back, looking from Cecilia to Jordan. "Is this true?" Isabel asked, her voice shrill. "You're broke." "I'm not broke," Jordan yelled, sweat beading on his forehead. "Cecilia, baby. Listen, we can talk about this. The divorce papers, we can tear them up. I was stressed. I made a mistake. I love you. Think about the baby." The room went deadly silent. Everyone heard the desperation. Everyone saw the mask slip. Cecilia laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "The baby," she asked. "The baby you called a financial anchor. The baby you left at a graveside." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a copy of the clean break agreement he had signed just days ago. "You wanted a clean break, Jordan. You wanted no ties. You signed away your rights to my assets. You signed away your rights to the sterling fortune. And most importantly," she ripped the paper in half, then in half again, letting the confetti rain down on his polished shoes. "You showed me exactly who you are. Security." The two guards stepped forward. "Please escort Mr. Blackwood off the premises," Cecilia commanded, "and make sure he takes the subway. He doesn't have a car anymore." The heavy oak doors of the Copley Plaza swung shut behind Jordan Blackwood, with a finality that felt like a gavel striking a sound block. One moment, he had been inside, surrounded by the warmth of crystal chandeliers, the smell of expensive perfume, and the intoxicating hum of power. The next, he was standing on the sidewalk of St. James Avenue, the slush seeping instantly through the thin soles of his Italian leather loafers. The Boston wind was merciless that night. It whipped down the street, cutting through his tuxedo jacket as if it were made of tissue paper. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill spreading through his veins. "Isabel!" Jordan gasped his breath, forming frantic white clouds in the air. He scrambled to catch up with her. She was walking fast, her red heels clicking sharply against the pavement, heading toward the line of idling taxis. "Isabel, wait. Don't walk away from me." He grabbed her elbow, his fingers slipping on the silk of her dress. She spun around, ripping her arm away with a violence that startled him. Under the harsh orange glow of the streetlights, her face wasn't beautiful anymore. The makeup was perfect, but the expression was twisted into a sneer of pure, unfiltered calculation. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "You're making a scene. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough for one night?" "Embarrassed myself." "She's lying." Jordan's voice cracked, bordering on hysteria. He looked around wildly, hoping none of the other gala guests exiting the hotel could hear him. "Cecilia is bluffing. It's a scare tactic. She can't own my debt. That's illegal. It's corporate espionage." Isabel let out a laugh that sounded like glass shattering. "Illegal, Jordan. Do you think I'm stupid? You think I didn't see the look on Andrew Sterling's face? That wasn't a bluff. That was an execution." She pulled her phone from her clutch, her thumbs flying across the screen. "What are you doing?" Jordan asked, his voice trembling. "Cancelling our trip to St. Bart's," she said without looking up, "and blocking your number. Isabel, please. We're a team. I'm the CEO of Nexus Flow. I can fix this. I just need to get to the office in the morning. I'll fire the board. I'll counter-sue. We'll be laughing about this on the beach by Tuesday." Isabel finally looked at him, Her eyes were dead. There was no love, no lust, not even pity. There was only the vacancy of a parasite looking for a new host. You aren't a CEO, Jordan. You're a man who trespassed at his ex-wife's party in a suit you don't own, driving a car you can't keep. You're a liability. And I don't date liabilities. A yellow cab pulled up to the curb. Isabel opened the door. Wait. How am I supposed to get home? Jordan pleaded. They took the keys to the Mercedes. Take the subway, she said, slamming the door. Jordan watched the taillights of the taxi disappear into the darkness. He stood alone on the corner, shivering violently. He reached into his pocket for his wallet to call an Uber. He opened the app, his fingers numb. Requesting ride. Payment declined. He frowned, tapping the screen again. He tried his Platinum Amex. Declined. He tried the corporate Visa. Card suspended by administrator. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He checked his bank app. Account frozen. He had $42 in cash in his wallet. Jordan Blackwood, the man who had ordered a $300 bottle of wine at dinner 4 hours ago, buttoned his jacket, lowered his head against the wind, and began the long, humiliating walk to the subway station. The next morning, the sun rose over Boston with a deceptive brightness. It looked like a day full of promise. For Jordan, it was the day the guillotine finally dropped. He had slept, if you could call it sleeping, on the sofa of his office. He had managed to sneak into the building late at night using the emergency stairwell key he kept hidden, terrifyingly aware that his main badge might already be deactivated. He needed to be there before the staff arrived. He needed to control the narrative. At 7:00 a.m., he was sitting at his glass desk, drinking stale coffee from the break room, frantically trying to access the company server. Access denied. Contact administrator. Come on, he muttered, slamming the keyboard. I am the administrator. The elevator doors chimed down the hall. Jordan straightened his tie. He prepared his speech. He would tell them it was a hostile takeover attempt. He would rally the troops. But it wasn't the troops who walked in. It was a team of 4 people. In the lead was a woman Jordan recognized, Stella Jenkins, the forensic accountant from Sterling, Roth and Vance. Behind her were 2 large men in security uniforms, and trailing them, looking uncharacteristically smug, was his own VP of Operations, Morgan. Morgan. Jordan stood up, feigning confidence. Thank God you're here. We have a serious security breach. My login isn't working, and I think Cecilia has hacked the— Save it, Jordan, Morgan said. He didn't look deferential today. He looked tired of Jordan's bullying. It's over. Stella Jenkins stepped forward. She placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. Mr. Blackwood, this is a formal notice of your removal as CEO of Nexus Flow, effective immediately. The board convened an emergency session at 6:00 a.m. this morning via video conference. The vote was unanimous. You can't do that, Jordan shouted, his face flushing red. I hold 30% of the voting shares. Actually, Stella corrected him, her voice monotone and professional. You pledged those shares as collateral for the emergency bridge loan you took out 3 months ago. The loan you defaulted on yesterday when the noteholder Sterling Maritime called it in. Your shares have been seized to cover the debt. She gestured to the open laptop on his desk. Furthermore, our preliminary audit has uncovered over $200,000 in misappropriated company funds, private jet charters to the Caribbean, jewelry purchases listing client gifts that never reached any client, and the lease on a luxury apartment in Seaport for a consultant named Isabel Vance. Jordan felt the blood drain from his face. That was business development. It was embezzlement, Stella said. Mrs. Sterling Blackwood has graciously decided not to press criminal charges provided you vacate the premises immediately and sign a non-compete agreement that effectively bans you from working in the tech sector in Massachusetts for 5 years. And if I don't sign, Jordan whispered. Then the Boston police are waiting in the lobby, Stella said pleasantly. And the story of your arrest goes to the press within the hour. Jordan looked at Morgan. Morgan looked away. He looked at the security guards. They were waiting. Slowly, with a shaking hand, Jordan picked up the pen. He signed the death warrant of his career. "Thank you," Stella said, snatching the paper away. She nodded to the guards. "Escort him out. He is not permitted to take any electronics or documents. Personal items only." One of the guards tossed a small cardboard box onto the sleek glass desk. Jordan stared at it. It was so small. 10 years of grinding. 10 years of late nights, skipped holidays and ruthless ambition. It all fit into a box that used to hold printer paper. He put his framed photo of himself receiving an Entrepreneur of the Year award into the box. He put in his stress ball. He hesitated over his stapler, but the guard shook his head. "Company, property." The walk to the elevator was the longest journey of his life. The open plan office was full now. 50 employees, people he had hired, people he had screamed at, people he had underpaid, stopped typing. The silence was deafening. No one said goodbye. No one looked sad. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off his view of the empire he had built and lost, Jordan saw the new logo being projected onto the wall in the lobby. Nexus Flow, a Sterling company. The weeks that followed were a blur of degradation. The eviction notice for the condo came 3 days later. Cecilia wasn't just kicking him out, she was selling the unit. Jordan had 48 hours to pack. He sold his designer suits to a consignment shop on Newbury Street for pennies on the dollar just to pay for a moving van. He moved into a dingy one-room studio in Revere near the airport. The walls were paper-thin, vibrating every time a plane took off overhead. The carpet smelled of old cigarettes and despair. He tried to get a job. He really did. He interviewed at a mid-tier software firm in Cambridge. The hiring manager, a man Jordan had once snubbed at a conference, looked at his resume and smiled. "Jordan Blackwood," the man said. "Impressive credentials. But I have to ask, aren't you the guy who divorced the Sterling heiress at her mother's funeral?" The story had gone viral, not just in Boston, but everywhere. A tech blog had picked it up, then the tabloids, then the national news. He was the billion-dollar fumbler. He was a meme. That's a personal matter," Jordan said stiffly. "It speaks to character, though, doesn't it?" the manager said, closing the folder. "We value integrity here. I don't think you'd be a good culture fit." Door after door slammed in his face. His network, the friends he had parted with, the investors he had courted, ghosted him. When he called Davis the banker from the gala, the line went dead instantly. By month 4, the money from the pawned watches ran out. Jordan Blackwood, the visionary, the disruptor, found himself standing in line at a temp agency, wearing a suit that no longer fit because he had lost 20 pounds from stress and a diet of instant noodles. "We have a spot," the exhausted woman behind the counter said. "Barista, coffee chain downtown, minimum wage plus tips. Can you operate a machine?" Jordan closed his eyes. He remembered the espresso machine in his penthouse kitchen, a chrome Italian beast that cost $4,000. "Yes," he whispered. "I can operate a machine." While Jordan's world was shrinking to the size of a coffee cup, Cecilia's was expanding into a universe. The birth of Alexander Sterling Blackwood was not the lonely, terrifying event Cecilia had feared it would be. She wasn't alone. Andrew was there, pacing the waiting room like an expectant grandfather. The best doctors in the country attended to her. When she held Alexander for the first time, looking into his deep blue eyes, she didn't feel the grief of her divorce. She felt an overwhelming surge of victory. "You are safe," she whispered to the sleeping infant, kissing his forehead. "You will never know what it's like to worry about the heat being turned off. You will never know a man like your father." Cecilia returned to work 2 months later, bringing Alexander with her. She turned the executive boardroom of Sterling Maritime into a nursery. She was a natural leader. She possessed her mother's caution and her father's work ethic, but she added her own modern sharpness. She didn't just stabilize the company. She revolutionized it. She pivoted the logistics fleet toward green energy, a move that sent the stock price soaring. But her passion was the foundation. The Sterling Fund for Single Mothers wasn't just a tax write-off. It was a crusade. Cecilia spent her weekends visiting shelters, listening to women who had been abandoned, financially abused, or left with nothing. She wrote checks that saved lives. She funded daycares, legal aid clinics, and job training programs. She became a symbol. The Iron Lady of Beacon Hill, the press called her. But to the women she helped, she was simply the saint. 6 months after the funeral, Forbes put her on the cover. She looked radiant, powerful, and untouchable. Jordan saw the magazine. It was sitting on a table in the coffee shop where he worked, left behind by a customer in a rush. He stared at her face while he wiped down the table with a rag. She looked so different from the woman he had left in the rain. She looked free. He felt a pang of something that wasn't quite regret. He was too narcissistic for true regret, but it was a deep, aching loss. He realized he hadn't just lost the money. He had lost the light. It was a Tuesday in May when the universe decided to twist the knife one last time. The Boston Public Garden was alive with color. Tulips lined the pathways, and the swan boats drifted lazily across the lagoon. It was the kind of day that made you glad to be alive. Cecilia had taken the afternoon off. It was a rare indulgence. She walked the path near the bridge, pushing the vintage silver pram. Alexander was babbling happily, grabbing at the sunlight filtering through the trees. 2 bodyguards walked a discreet distance behind her, burly men in suits who scanned the crowd for threats. "Shall we get a coffee, Alexander?" Cecilia cooed to the baby. "Mommy needs a boost." She approached the small upscale coffee kiosk near the Arlington Street entrance. It was busy, a line of tourists and business people waiting for their midday caffeine. Cecilia waited her turn. When she reached the window, she adjusted her sunglasses. "I'll have a large oat milk latte, please. And a bottle of water." "Coming right up," a voice said from inside the kiosk. The voice stopped Cecilia's heart for a beat. It was familiar. It was a voice she used to hear whispering in her ear. A voice she used to hear shouting about stock prices. She lowered her sunglasses. Inside the cramped kiosk, surrounded by the hiss of steam and the smell of roasted beans, was Jordan. He looked terrible. His hair, once styled with expensive gel, was limp and overgrown. He had dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and cheap pillows. He wore a green apron that was stained with coffee grounds. He froze when he saw her. The portafilter he was holding clattered onto the counter. "See," he breathed. The people in line behind Cecilia shifted impatiently, but neither of them noticed. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had happened. The funeral, The rain, the papers, the gala. Jordan looked at her. He saw the diamond earrings catching the sun. He saw the tailored Chanel blazer. He saw the peace in her posture. Then he looked at the pram. "Is that?" His voice broke. He leaned forward over the counter, his eyes filling with sudden, unexpected tears. "Is that him? Is that my son?" Cecilia looked at Jordan. She looked at the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health, and who had run at the first sign of trouble. She remembered the envelope he had handed her at the grave. She didn't feel anger anymore. Anger required energy. She felt only a distant, cool pity. "His name is Alexander," Cecilia said. Her voice was steady, calm, and utterly detached. "Alexander," Jordan repeated, tasting the name. "He looks like me." "He has my eyes," Cecilia corrected him gently. Jordan wiped his hands on his apron. He looked desperate. "See, Cecilia, look at me. I'm paying for it. Okay, I'm paying for what I did. I lost everything. I'm living in a dump. I make $12 an hour." He gestured around the tiny kiosk. "I learned my lesson," he pleaded. Can't I just see him? Just for a minute, I'm his father." Cecilia looked at her son, who was happily chewing on a toy giraffe. She thought about the kind of father Jordan would be. The kind who measured worth in dollars. The kind who saw people as assets or liabilities. She looked back at Jordan. "A father is someone who stays, Jordan," she said. "You made your choice at the cemetery. You chose the clean break." She reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. She placed it in the tip jar on the counter. Jordan stammered. "I don't want your money." "Take it," Cecilia said. "My lawyer tells me your child support payments are 3 weeks late. Again, I'd hate to have to file a garnishment order with your manager here. It might be embarrassing for you." The color drained from Jordan's face. He looked at his manager, a stern-faced teenager, who was already glaring at him for holding up the line. "Here is your latte, ma'am," Jordan whispered, sliding the cup across the counter. His hand shook so badly that foam spilled over the side. "It's a little cold," Cecilia noted, touching the cup. She didn't drink it. She left it there on the counter, a testament to his failure. "Goodbye, Jordan," she said. She turned the pram around. She didn't look back. She walked away down the sun-dappled path, her head held high, walking toward a future that belonged entirely to her and her son. Jordan watched her go. He watched the bodyguards fall in step behind her. He watched the way the light seemed to follow her. "Hey, buddy," a customer yelled from behind him. "Are you going to make my cappuccino or just stare?" Jordan blinked, snapping back to his reality. He looked down at the cold cup of coffee Cecilia had left behind. He looked at the $20 bill in the jar. He picked up the rag. He wiped the counter. "Coming right up," he said, his voice hollow. He turned back to the machine, the steam rising up to hide his face as he finally understood the true quot of the price he had paid. He had chased the world and lost his soul. And now he had neither. Wow. Talk about karma hitting hard. Jordan thought he could throw away his wife like yesterday's trash just because he thought she was poor. But he ended up throwing away a $500 million fortune and his own son. It just goes to show, never underestimate the person standing beside you, and never ever mistake silence for weakness. Cecilia played the long game, and she won everything. What do you think? Did Jordan deserve that brutal ending? Or was Cecilia too harsh by leaving him with nothing? I want to hear your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel, And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you betray.